9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. According to the online article titled Domestic Violence Statistics, in those 9 seconds, a woman in the United States was assaulted or beaten. In another article titled Domestic Violence Facts, that by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, they inform us that 1 in every 4 women and 1 in every 7 men have been victims of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Applying that statistic to our class, at least 10 of the women and 2 of the men who will hear this speech will experience domestic violence during their lifetime. In hopes of decreasing this frequency, I want to inform you about domestic violence. As many of us are in or striving towards the medical field, we will often be in a position to observe possible domestic violence situations and are often whom victims will turn to when they seek help. However, everyone is in a constant position to observe these situations and reach out to victims, whether they be a coworker, neighbor, student, or even a family member. During my speech, I will inform you of the common behavioral signs displayed by both the victims of domestic violence and the abuser, and physical signs displayed by the domestic violence victims. It's also important to know how to address these possible incidences once they are identified. While I've never experienced domestic violence personally, I have been educated on the subject through my position in healthcare and the classes I took previously working towards a degree in social work. As I plan to further my healthcare career and advance into nursing, I completed additional research to increase my knowledge base. So before we think about addressing domestic violence, let's start about learning some signs to recognize it. As domestic violence involves 2 individuals, recognizing the signs of domestic violence includes both the behaviors of the victim and those of the abuser. Knowing the behavioral signs displayed by victims help one to identify potential situations. In an article entitled Early Warning Signs of Domestic Violence, the organization Safe Place, Michigan State University, describes these following signs. Victims are often absent from school or work, and these repeated absences is a red flag for domestic violence. Another behavioral sign is low self-esteem. Some victims have chronic low self-esteem in all areas of life, while others display confidence and esteem in areas such as work and as a mother, and with hobbies, but they have low self-esteem when it comes to their relationship. Personality changes are another sign. You may notice a very outgoing person become quiet and shy when his or her partner is present. This follows the belief that the victim walks on eggshells to avoid angering their partner. Along with being aware of the behavioral signs of victims, it is also important to know the behavioral signs of the abuser. In an article titled Domestic Violence, Dr. Roxanne Edwards describes these following behaviors of the abuser. They may attempt to answer all questions for the victim or isolate him or her from others. This causes the abuser to appear controlling or coercive. It is also common that they use emotional abuse to control their victim. When one uses intimidation, he or she is displaying a sign of being an abuser. They often threaten to remove money, take children, or harm themselves or the victim. Abusers also use a condescending tone, which gives them a power upper hand. It is important to keep these behaviors in mind and use them to watch for signs of domestic violence. While observing behaviors is an important method to use when identifying domestic violence, watching for physical signs of abuse is equally as important. Being aware of the physical signs of domestic violence provides one with more warning signs of domestic violence to identify. Physical signs of abuse can be observed in different stages of healing, so it is important to know how long-term and short-term signs can be seen. Knowing the common characteristics of domestic violence and injuries will help you identify earlier signs of domestic violence. These following physical signs are also identified in Dr. Dryden Edwards' article. When observing wounds, bite marks, rope burns, bruises, and whelps with the outline of recognizable weapons are all commonly related to domestic violence situations. Some injuries seen more commonly with domestic violence are eardrum ruptures, rectal or genital injuries, facial, neck, head, torso, and arm scrapes and bruises. Since physical signs of domestic violence are not always observed when they are initially inflicted, it is important to also know the long-term physical effects of abuse. Dr. Roxanne Edwards' article also includes some of the more common medical complaints victims of domestic violence present with. These complaints include headaches, neck pain, chest pain, a choking sensation, and urinary tract infections. Although they are considered medical complaints, victims will often voice these issues to non-medical individuals, even in casual conversation. Observing these complaints repeatedly or in conjunction with one another is a high alert for domestic violence. It is also helpful to be aware of signs of healing physical wounds from domestic violence, such as how bruises appear during later stages of healing and the x-ray results of healed bone fractures and broken bones. Fresh and long-term signs of abuse are extremely important in the identification of domestic violence, but you must keep in mind that many victims choose to hide their physical signs, and they may even create stories to explain them. Recognizing you have identified a potential victim is only the first step. If domestic violence is expected, you must also know how to address the situation properly. It is important to get the victim away from the abuser in order to question them about the abuse. When communicating with the victim, you must use therapeutic communication. Some methods of therapeutic communication include indirect questions and reassurance that help us out there. Victims of domestic violence can turn to safe houses, counseling, and support groups. Location of safe houses are within the community are kept safe to protect those within them. National hotlines are another important resource for domestic violence victims. In an article titled Domestic Violence Hotlines and Resources by the Feminist Majority Foundation, there is a number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, as well as the Incest, Rape, and Abuse National Network. Victims are often scared to come open at first, so it is important to be persistent with the methods mentioned and to always remind them that help is out there. Domestic violence can be observed through both behavioral and physical signs, and once these situations are observed, it is important to properly address them with confidence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Just think about how many people suffered abuse during the time that we've spent listening to me. These victims could be anyone you know, and possibly at some point in your life, even yourself. Thank you for listening.